Asia Media Forum. And in this session, of course, we will be discussing the challenges for young political leaders in the ASEAN region, particularly when democracy is under threat in several countries. So the big question is, will the new generation politics reinvent politics for the near future, ride on the current political wave, or fall back into the old ways of politics? So in the session, you will get to talk to and listen to the vision from the new generation politicians from Thailand, as well as many countries in the ASEAN region. And please be informed once again that there will be no live stream of this seminar, but the panel discussion will be recorded for broadcast on Thai PBS later on. So right now, may I please invite the following onto the stage. I apologize if I pronounce your name incorrectly, so forgive me for that. So may I please invite Raoul, Danniel, Manuel from Kabataan Party from the Philippines onto the stage. And next up, Puteri, Anetta, Komarudin from Golkar Party, Indonesia. And next up, Parit Wacharasindhu from the Move Forward Party, Thailand. And last but not least, Neth, Pheaktra from the Cambodian People's Party, Cambodia. And Tulip, Naksompop, Blauw will be the moderator for this session.
Thank you, Neth. Okay, come to the last session. We're going to talk about the politics in different countries in ASEAN, which I believe in this time and age is all connected. Maybe this will be the first time you guys meet each other, but I believe in the future you probably will meet each other in some of those leader summits and whatnot. Amen. 10, 20 years. Anyway, so first question I would ask you guys is, of course, being a new generation of politicians, walking into politics, you carry some kind of expectation. But what is your own expectation? And when you face the reality, is it different or the same as what you expected? Maybe we start from Raoul.
Mike. Okay, good afternoon, everyone. And of course, good afternoon to my fellow young leaders in the ASEAN. In my case, as a young leader, before I entered Congress, I already had expectations that were based on the realities of our country. For example, I have observed that for the longest time in politics, the field has not really been that even. For example, young people don't have as much space to speak or to be part of institutions where decisions are being made. May that be in the national level or in the local level. But as young people, we really want to assert that we deserve space, no matter how small may that be, so that we can put forward our proposals for issues, especially those that really matter to us, like education, providing jobs. Now, with that expectation, we in our party, the Youth Party of the Philippines, see to it that even though there are constraints, we still maximize whatever spaces that we have to promote youth participation. We are confronting a type of politics wherein political dynasties have been existing. Names may be changing, but the political landscape is dominated by families or political dynasties that are supported by large names, I mean those who have already been popular in the country. So despite us in our party, we are driven by young people who don't have much resources. We only rely, for example, on our personal contributions or support from whoever sympathizes with young people. Those are our means to ensure our representation inside Congress. So that would be all for now.
Talking about young voters, though, it's very interesting, I would say, that being a young politician, you guys would be expected to communicate with the young voters too, right? In some kind of sense, or have been pressured to at least be the one that communicate to them, right? So the next we'll go to Parit. Maybe you can tell us your expectation walking into politics, and you just made a big change recently from quite a conservative party to I don't want to say totally progressive, but quite progressive party compared to other parties in Thailand. What's changed? What is the expectation? How do you feel now?
Sure. I think before coming on to that kind of the reasons behind that decision, I think addressing your first question about the expectation, I think regardless of whether you're young or old, so regardless of your age, I think the expectation of anyone walking into politics is very similar, which is expecting to create a better change for the country. Now, of course, the change that each politician wants to see may be different depending on their ideologies and what their vision of an ideal society should be. But at least I think every politician's dream is to move the country closer to that ideal version of society. Now, if we zoom in on kind of young politicians or young political leaders, I think there are two key challenges that any young politician faces. I think the first one is that sometimes the ideal version of society of younger generations are very different and increasingly different to the ideal version of society that older generations may wish to see. And we see that that generation gap is not only widening, but it's also becoming deeper as well. As kind of the world changes at a more rapid rate, kind of a 5-year gap or a 10-year gap, a 10-year age gap becomes much, much wider. So a 60 and a 50-year-old may not think too differently, but a 30 and a 20-year-old, that similar 10-year gap is actually much wider because the experiences that a 30-year-old faced when he or she was growing up is very different to the world that a 20-year-old was growing up. So I think that's the first challenge. And we can dive deeper about kind of what young generations in Thailand want to see compared to other generations, and whether that difference is similar in other countries as well. But I think the second challenge then is, I mean, it's normal in a democratic society that people will have different views of what society should be like. But the second challenge is that sometimes young people's voices are not really heard as loudly as other people's voices. And I think right now, if you look at the political structure in Thailand, it is not ideal for incorporating the opinions of younger generations. I think there are 3 steps towards that happening, right? The first step is, are you heard? So are people actually hearing what the younger generations want? Do younger generations have a voice? Are they allowed to freely express their opinions? Are they allowed to ask questions, whether in society or in the classrooms? Then the second step is, once they're heard, are they listened to? Because sometimes you're heard, as in the older generations, the people in power know what the younger generations want, but they don't incorporate their decision or their preferences into the decision making. So after you're heard, and are you listened to? And then finally, are you treated as equals? Because sometimes younger generations are listened to, their opinions are incorporated into the decision making, but they're not treated as equals. They're treated as younger generations, the youth, right? And I think what we want as younger generation is not to be seen as the youth, but to be seen as equal partners in creating this society. We don't want a society that is created for us, but we want a society that is created with us. Right? And I think right now, I mean, we can dive deeper into where Thailand fares across those 3 steps. But I think these are the 2 key challenges when it comes to young politicians trying to raise their voice and voice out what the youth wants to see. Yeah.
Puteri, you are a young politician in a long-standing political party in Indonesia, right? Is it carry different kind of challenges or different expectation when you walk into the party? What is your reality, and do you feel that you are heard as a young politician?
Yeah. Thank you, Tulip, and good afternoon, everyone. Golkar is actually the oldest political party in Indonesia, and it is very exciting for us, young generation, because my seniors actually wanted to change. They are always realized that, our party would be irrelevant if we just stayed the way we are. And by launching several channels for digital channels, and then we open some kind of institution where even not non-Golkar cadres can join for political and public policy education. It's open for public, and mostly it comes with scholarship. So we want to create a generation of able voters, not just politicians, but able voters who is going to change their sectors or industries wherever they are. So I am pretty sure that this is also the case in most countries where old political parties, they realize that this is the time where they have to be friend with, us, younger generation, otherwise they could be irrelevant. So the expectation when I first entered Golkar, because my family has been in Golkar for I don't know how many decades, but I expected to see a lot of, resistance, because I am double minority, you can say, in Indonesia, because there's not many female young politicians yet in Indonesia. I don't know in Thailand, but that's the case, because our patriarchy culture is still really strong. But in reality, it's not that bad anymore. It really surprised me that it has changed. So I have been inviting a lot of, my friends who are passionate in their activism to be able to just have that courage to enter the world of politics, who looks like jungle for most people, just to bring more colors and see the policies that they wanted to be realized. So, and we have upcoming election in 2024. So we're gonna see whether the young voters who are dominating the total number of voters, 60% of voters would be under 40 in 2024, could see the success of their the results of their activism. Yeah.
Okay, Neth, your party is, of course, also one of the longest party in Cambodia. And looking from the outside in, it's pretty stable, right? Yeah. Do you also feel stable inside the party as well? Do party feel like they have to revolt themselves through time? And even though you are not, 20-something years old, but compared to most politicians in Cambodia, you are younger generation.
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you for inviting me to this forum. If we're looking at Cambodia history, Cambodia have a strategy, the human strategy, that more than 2 million people has been killed, most of them educated people. And then we have in 1979 just 6 million people, and those of them, they are farmer and worker. So the human resource is very low for us after liberation from the genocide regime. So the rebuild country restart from 1979, and those who are leader of the country since 1979, they are youth on that time. So after the liberation, they get married and produce the baby. So that's why if we're looking about the age between the new generation and the old generation, a bit long gap between. So now the new generation, they are aged between 30 to 40, 45. And the entry of the young generation to the politics is starting the last 20 years. So we restart with the integration between the old generation and the young generation. So back at your first question relating to the entry of the politics, for me, to me is that to defend the country from the wars, from the genocide, crime against humanity, and war crime, that happen. So that's why now the young political leaders focus most on how to protect peace and stability in the country. So that's why the solidarity among the party is very strong for the ruling party, for the Cambodian People Party, that they rule the country since 1979. And then in 1991, Cambodia get the Parit peace agreement with the general election, the first election organized by the United Nations. Since then, Cambodia adopt the liberal democracy and pluralism. We have the democratic election every 5 years. So now we are 6 mandates, and we will organize the election for the seven mandates next July 2023. So this is the way that we engage for the country, the old generation and the young generation for the Cambodian party is to maintain the peace and stability first, because everything cannot develop, including development, the country, economic development, human rights, democracy without peace. So that's why our party, regarding to the solidarity, we adopt the rule that internal democracy and we respect the majority. So every decisions should adopt by the Congress of the party, and then they make a decision based on the reality and also respect a rule of law. So that's why our party still strong, and of course, a person not perfect. Even my party rule the country, we have the bad point, the weak point and the strong point. But what is the importance? We move forward.
Right.
So economic development, the big achievement of the Cambodian People Party: first, liberate Cambodian people from the genocide. Second, make end the civil war, dissolve the political and military organization of the Khmer Rouge, and then make end bring peace for Cambodia and development. And if we're looking at the development, since we have the full peace in 1998, economic growth for Cambodia around is more than 7%. For more than 20 years already.
But would you say that the younger generation of politicians would carry the same kind of goal and feeling walking into politics in Cambodia, though?
We have the different ways, but we need to divide into parts. First, to protect achievement of the party and the old generation. That is the most important. And the achievement of the old generation is peace, and stability, because we spend 16 years in the civil war from 1970 to 1998. We have just only 24 years in full peace. So this is the legacy and the achievement that the young generation need to protect. And for the older achievement, like stability and development, we need to keep it for move forward. But for the young generation, we are looking also for the transformation for the now. So because, like I mentioned, that the new generation is a long gap between the old generation. So now we are new one. 2/3 of the people are the young generation. So the new generation, in terms of the leaders, we think how to integrate the young generation in the world, and by supporting them. And we have the national policy for developing youth on the education, capacity building, health, and political engagement in the decisions in the country. And this is the way that the ruling party working on this, and then we have the framework, the policy to move forward with the young generation, because we also get the support, you know, from the voter. Most of them, they are young generation. We have more than 10 million people, so 70% of them, they are young voter. And we get, the last election, the commune election, we get more than 70% of vote. So they are young. So our policy designed also to respond the needing of the youth is job, education, capacity building, and the lifestyle of the young generation. So this is the way that we work on that.
Okay, so of course, when we talk about young politicians, people would say, how do you connect with young generation and young voters and such? But it's also important to connect to other generation as well. So how do you guys connect yourself or make yourself related to other group of voters or other group that people have to work with? Maybe we go to Raoul first, because your party is Party of Youth. The name is so obvious, but it doesn't mean you can only work with young people. So how do you go about working on things?
Even though we are a party that is for young people, actually our executive committee is composed of young people, all of them. And I serve as the president of the party. All my other officers are young people as well. But yeah, that was correct. It doesn't mean that we only cater to the youth solely, because actually our platforms cut across various sectors, various ages, and various distinctions that exist in our society. We believe that our role as young people is not just to care about our specific concerns, but also to give a voice to other problems that exist in Philippine society. Because if those problems are not solved sooner or later, then future generations of young people will inherit those problems. That is why during our campaign, we held our last elections just this May of 2022. And we really ensured that when we go to communities, we don't just talk to the young people. We also talk to the mothers, the fathers, because aside from the fact that they have children who are potential voters for our party, we also believe that issues are interconnected. For example, we don't just talk about education, because after young people graduate from universities or colleges, then they will look for jobs. And that is why right now we are also working with professionals, those who work in various workplaces, and support their calls for higher wages to cope with increasing prices in society. So that is one example how we young people bridge or form bridges between various sectors and groups. We also have been effective, as I can say, in doing that, because during the elections, our voter turnout was not just composed of young people. The campaigners are, of course, young, but in terms of votes, even those who are not young were able to vote for us, because they believed that the voice of the youth can cut across those kinds of distinctions that I mentioned. Also, inside Congress, if I am to elaborate how we work inside Congress, as I also shared in conversations with my fellow guests here, in Philippine Congress, we have two chambers, the Senate and the House of Representatives. And I am part of the House of Representatives. In the House, we are composed of 312 members, so that's a lot. But those who are of young age, those who are 30 years old and below, we are only around 50 of us. So that comes with advantages and disadvantages. So one advantage is that we can talk among each other so that we can help as to how we can put forward bills or resolutions that can benefit young people. But one disadvantage would be because they do not represent the youth. They were not voted to represent the youth, but to represent their legislative districts. So that means they also have to balance the kinds of proposals that they support inside Congress. So that leaves me and others who support youth issues with the very challenging task of reaching out to the older members of Congress. And we can feel the difficulty, especially when we talk about controversial issues that have, for example, there are practices or policies that are accepted as normal. But for the young people of today, we want to change those practices. We want to break traditions that we see are no longer beneficial. But of course, we have to surmount the obstacle of convincing our fellow officials to listen to the youth.
What is more difficult, or convincing people and the fellow politicians in the House of Representatives and Congress, or try to get elected as a new politician, or try to get elected as a new politician? What is more difficult?
Well, if I'm to choose between the two, I think it is more difficult to convince people inside inside the House of Representatives, because when we talk to the ordinary citizens, it is actually easier to build connections and find unities, because we may not agree on all issues under the sun, but as long as we find one common issue, then we can already form connections, have activities that we can conduct together. For example, when we go to local communities, we may not agree on whom to support as president or as vice president, but because we agree that wages must be increased, because we believe that all young people should have access to education, then that is already a starting point for us to talk and assert youth representation inside Congress. But after we get elected and we are now dealing with people who, of course, have their own opinions, then, yeah, it's difficult.
How about you, Puteri?
Which one? Your question? Is it harder to convince people outside or inside?
Yeah.
Well, I think we all know the answer, but so I realized that one of the ways to gain respect from your fellow MPs is just to have the data and not to talk nonsense, because they have been there for I don't know how many terms. Most of the people in my commission, because I am currently seated in House Commission 11, so there's 11 commissions in House of Representatives of Indonesia, and my House Commission is considered to be one of the most senior in a way, because it covers finance and the national development planning, the long-term planning of Indonesia. So most of them actually used to be bankers, professionals, and they have been there for 5 terms, 6 terms, since I was not born. So they have been MPs. And when we offer them, breakthrough or new ideas, as long as we have the right arguments and the right laws and regulations to back it up, they will accept our policy proposals and is willing to back it up. Like I have done it several times, and I found that we can always find the middle ground between the needs of the younger generations. We also know that we need stronger policies for environments. In Indonesia, it happens, and stronger policies for social protection, for informal workers, because we have new jobs coming up that are not regulated yet. And we have to change a lot of policies in our financial sectors, because we have a lot of innovations going on. And with their experiences and their network, who is of course, stronger than our network, it combines perfectly into what I call is the perfect combination of the younger and the older generation. So as hard as it is, as as house of cards as it is, but I think we can really make this work if we're able to just stand in our ground and just convince them with the right data.
But when you're saying that you cannot talk nonsense, you have to have data to back you up. Does that mean like the other side, when they talk nonsense, how do you deal with them though?
Well, in Indonesia, we have very Eastern culture where when older people speak nonsense, you don't have to respond.
Oh, okay.
Not. And that's
I think in a lot of culture you don't.
Yes. That's what my parents told me. Like,
okay.
You have to be able to show your respect to the elders. So I just nod.
So if I say anything to you and you just nod, does that mean I might be tired?
No.
I'm just kidding.
No, I was listening to them. That's not. No, but what is interesting is that when I was first elected in 2019, we established this youth caucus thing for the first time in the Indonesian parliament. And we now have 72 members under 40 MPs. And it is even more difficult to convince them because we have 9 political parties in our House of Representatives, and 9 political parties have different interests and ideology, and so I think age does not really make it more difficult in a way. But your arguments is more important, I guess. Yeah.
How about you, Parit? Because you're coming from quite a conservative party, there must be something happened there that made you realize, okay, this is not for me. What happened there?
I think for me, the reason for switching political party was more out of ideology than a matter of age.
Because it's quite from different spectrum, I would say, right? Is it?
I think it's shifting that way. But I think if anyone followed my, I guess, very short political journey, I think what I wanted to see for the country and what the current Democrat Party wants to see for the country has diverged a lot since when I was a member, right? So I think in that sense, it's not really to do with age. It's more to do with me initially expecting the party to take a certain ideological path, joining to try and make that happen, realizing that actually that's not what the majority of the people in the party want, and then parting ways. So I think it's more out of ideology than age. But I think to come back to your earlier question, and I think everyone's mentioned this, which is that it's probably not healthy for any political party to see themselves as representing any one generation, right? Because at the end of the day, like if you go back to the fundamental question of why political parties exist. They exist to drive change in the country. And to drive change, you need to be in government. And to be in government, you need to govern for all generations, right? So I think when you come back to that fundamental question of why political parties exist, you realize that the agenda that each party is driving, although maybe on different ideologies across the spectrum, must be to create a better society for all generations, not just for one single generation. Right? And I think, so that's I think my first point, which is I'm sure regardless of whether you're perceived as being a party that's popular with younger generations or older generations, you need to think about policies and ideas that will improve the lives of all generations. And I think that is what we are trying to do at Move Forward Party. I think it's undeniable that public perception see us as being the party of the younger generations or party of new generations, right? But we never express ourselves as being party of new generation. Because on the one hand, we need to remain humble that maybe there are segments of younger generations that may disagree with us. And then we need to always remind ourselves that we are here to make the country better for all generations. But then having said that, I think what we notice, are 2 interesting points. The first one is that to your question about like how do you then communicate to different generations, right? For me, it's less to do with channel. Channel is of course important to understand which channel will reach which age group. But for me, I think content is key, right? At the end of the day, it's about what are the issues that you're talking to them with. And we noticed that for people who may feel positively about Move Forward Party, the policies that each generation likes are slightly different. So if we talk to our younger generations who are members of Move Forward Party, and we ask them like, what are the issues that they like us when we are speaking in Parliament, they often talk about things like democracy, constitutional reform, things like military reform, right? So very political policies. But when we talk to, I guess, like older generations who may consider voting for us, it's actually things like, anti-corruption policies, or when we, talk about like police reform, which is what is most appealing to them. So I think for me, that showcases that, each issue will appeal to different generations. And at the end of the day, we need to have an answer for all generations and all issues. But I think the second point is that, of course, there are certain difficult conversations that are often have to be made between all generations. So our certain policies that we develop or certain stances that we take are sometimes much more popular with certain generations than others. So I'll give you two examples. The first one is, of course, the policy to amend Article 112, which is the defamation law against the monarch. Now, when we talk about this policy, we see, support from younger generations, some of whom may actually want to go even beyond our proposal to amend, but to actually abolish and use the same defamation law as ordinary people. But we know that this is something which a lot of the older generations may feel quite suspicious, or they may feel unsure of. So I think making that difficult conversation with them is something that we have had to take. And I think I agree with what was said earlier, which is at the end of the day, you need to be fact-based, information-based. You try and depolarize the issue, try and reassure them that what we are doing here is not going to disrupt Thailand's kind of political regime, but it's simply amending a law on defamation to make it more in line with democracies around the world. Right? So I think that's one example of a difficult conversation that had to be made. The other one, of course, is our stance on equal marriage or same-sex marriage, right? Which I think gets broad support across all age groups in most parts of Thailand, but of course in areas where there is a high proportion of Muslim population. That's also another difficult conversation that we have to make, and we have to reassure them that our principles on equal marriage and giving everyone, regardless of their sex and gender, the right to marry, it's not contradicting with people's freedom of religion, right? And I think that for me is two very difficult conversations that we've had to make, and two, I guess, policies that when we look at the polling numbers, it's very clear that it's more popular with certain generations than others. Yeah.
How about you, Neth? Do you have, compare the communication with the way you have to communicate from within the party and outside the party from different generations?
In our party, we have the culture of respect. It means we respect the rule. Our party set up that the young generation, 1/3 of the young generation integrate in the all level of the administration.
Right.
It means we have parliament. So from the age 25, they can be representative. And now our party set rule that need to integrate 1/3 of the young generation in the list. For example, at the parliament, National Assembly, we have 125 members. So 1/3 are the young generation. In the government also, 1/3 is from the young generation.
Is this like the number game?
Yes.
Wow, okay.
And then also we go also to set up the number of the women in the administration too. That we want that the genders enter in.
Gender equality?
Yes, equality.
But there are two sides to look at this though. You either based on how qualified that persons are or...
Yes, because we now use for the young generation, they get very high educated. They are study at abroad. So the young generation enter in the politics and especially in the list of the parliament members, the government, they are starting from the bachelor, the master or the doctor. Most of them, they are educated abroad and they come back to the country and then to save the nation. So rule, respect the rule that one third for the young generation, all live well. So even we have the commune election, one third also the candidates are the young generation. Second, respect in terms of the the social harmonization. It means the old generation and the young generation, they are working together. So that's why the rule to integrate one third of the young generation in the administration all level, it means like a combination of the old and the young generation, they work together and they share experience. It is the transformation, the transfer of the experience and the knowledge. Of course, I think the Thai society and the Cambodian society, we have the same mindset. It means the old generation don't want to give the values to the young generation, and we have the same challenge. But like our speakers raised in the different country, but we have the same feeling that we need to show this is the real capacity, the real thing. So this is to show the old generation, because even me, when I appointed as Secretary of State to the Ministry of Environment, and for us, the new cabinet, we are young. And then this is the first step that we face for the old generation. Because the old generation, they used to work with our parents. And we are like their children.
Right.
So this is the main mindset, you know. But the way to overturn this mindset is to show your capacity. Work with efficiency and respect the rule.
Does that mean that being younger generation, you have to work harder?
Yes. This is to convince the older, you know. So that now, with the transitions of some responsibility, the old generation, they recognize and also they take us. That's why I'm talking about the harmonization between the old generation and the young generation is to work together. Even me, I work at the level at the ministry in the party. I go to the province. So the old generation, we talking with respect. This is the way that we work together, and then we see the long-term transitions.
Right.
That is the way that our party working on that. And Cambodia, we value the old generation is the living heritage. So the living heritage, it means the old generation, our parent generation, for example, right. They are in the civil war. They don't get the high education, but they have the long experience.
They have different kind of experience.
Yes. Right. Sorry. And for us, even we get the high education, but we have less experience. So this is the way that we work together, and we get the experience from the old generation, and we try to implement and to bring, you know, the experience from abroad and to merge to show. Now, the old generation and the young generation, they are very well cohesion and work together. Yeah.
Talking about capability of young politicians, I want you guys to tell us what do you think is the most pressing issue in your country, and how do you think you can make a change that you think you have capability of making that change or adjust something. Maybe we go with Parit first this time.
Okay, so I think in terms of the pressing issues for the country, I think there are probably three key problem statements that we need to solve. Number one is how do we create a system or country that everyone's voices are heard. So that's an issue of democratizing the country. Now, I think there are a couple of things that we need to do on that front. The first one is to redraft or write a new constitution that is written by an assembly that's elected by everyone in the country. Because right now, for those in the international audience that may not know, but Thailand is currently under a constitution that was written by a committee set up by the military coup back in 2017. 2014. The coup was in 2014. The constitution was ratified in 2017. It was passed through a referendum that was neither free nor fair. The people who came out to campaign against the constitution, many of them were arrested. And within the contents of the 279 articles of the constitution are many mechanics that allow for the military or the people that are under, I guess, in the same coalition as the military government, are able to extend their powers despite not potentially getting the democratic mandate from the people. So in the vote for who becomes prime minister, we have not just 500 elected MPs who vote, but we have 250 senators who are appointed by the military to vote on who becomes prime minister.
But they have to say though, in Thailand, every time anyone get elected, they change constitution.
Actually, the most of the times constitutions change because there's a military coup, not because of elected politicians. But I think we can all agree that unless we have a new constitution that is, has a content that is in line with democratic standards and is written with the participation of everyone in the country to have a free and fair set of rules that treat every political group equally, then we cannot get out of this political crisis. So I think that's number one, is to democratize this country, you need a new constitution. But in addition to that, I think the agenda of decentralization is also very important, because right now, most of the decision making in terms of which projects are approved is being done by the central government. So how do we also not just democratize the country as a whole and give everyone an equal right to vote and dictate how this country is governed, but it's also about decentralizing and allowing local governments more autonomy in terms of how their budget is spent, allowing for each province in Thailand to be governed by a leader that's elected from the people in the region. So I think that's number one. Number two is, apart from your voice being heard, you also need to make sure that the taxes that you pay into the country is worthwhile, right? And then that comes down to the issue of how do we spend our budget. So I think the second agenda is how do we reform how the budget is spent and divert more resources into building a welfare state. I mean, we know that the world is going to be even more uncertain in the future, whether it's technology displacing workers, whether it's the crisis of aging society, whether it's climate change. So we know that people's lives are going to become more fragile. So how does the country then invest more of its money in terms of building a welfare state to ensure that regardless of what crisis comes in, regardless of whether you're born to a rich family or not so rich family, at least there is a minimum level of quality of life that the state will be able to provide for you, right? Basic services like education, healthcare, clean water, public transport, for example. I think that's the second one. And then the third agenda is how do we help every person be successful in their dreams, right? So that comes down to reforming the education system to better equip people with the skills that are needed, things like critical thinking, things like English communications, as well as making sure that the economic rules are free and fair. And we promote free and fair competition in all industries and do not have any laws that allow for there to be monopolies built up and restrict the opportunities of young entrepreneurs who want to do their own startups or who want to have like a small, medium enterprise and compete under free and fair set of rules. So I think those are, I guess, three key issues that we see as being very pressing for the country at the moment.
So the first thing is constitution.
So democratization via new constitution and decentralization. Second one is budget reform to invest in building a welfare state. And thirdly is better equipping our people with the right skill sets through education reform and with free and fair opportunities through breaking up monopolies and ensuring free and fair competition in all industries.
That is more than three, I think.
Trying to,
you try to make it sound like three, but it's more than three. How about Indonesia, Puteri?
Well, the first one would be education, because Indonesia has one of the lowest level of literacy rate in ASEAN. So it is quite embarrassing because we have 290 million people now, And because of the pandemic, the school system has to adapt with the digital integration into the way they're teaching. And we realized that our teachers are not equipped with, such skills, and a lot of learning opportunities has been lost across the nation. And with the different digital infrastructure, the different quality, because we have 17,000 islands, and with the remote areas not accessible for laptops, and so I kind of think that because we are recovering at a very slow rate at the moment with the war going on right now, the first thing that we have to solve is how to spread the education evenly across the nation, and then make a generation more competitive in the sense that they are now competing not just with humans but also with robots and all. So that would be the first. And the second one would be how the economic system has created a really a deep imbalance, and the gap between the rich and the poor is getting wider in Indonesia. And you can see it from the way our netizens, the internet citizens in Indonesia, expressed their anger and emotions on social media, and how the rich are being, frowned upon, and one of the things that is also related to my first point is because we have quite problems in the education sector. It is very easy for people who have more knowledge in financial sector to go around just to rob people out of their wealth, because they have very low financial literacy rate. So the gap is 1 to 2. So we have 78% of financial inclusion rate, but only 36% of financial literacy rate. So that's just you can see how the gap results in a lot of problems. And maybe you have heard of the loan sharks. I'm not sure if you have it too in Thailand, but we have a lot of loan sharks in Indonesia, and we now have digital loan sharks in the form of financial technology loan providers. And then we're still perfecting our banking system, and yeah, we have a lot of work to do to just protect all these people from another robbery by the financial actors, irresponsible financial actors. And I think the final one would be the future of jobs for the younger generation, because we're supposed to have the demographic bonus in 2035, and it's coming in 13 years. But if we cannot capture that, we would just be middle income country with no prospect of being developed nation. And a lot of problems surrounding how we can make generation more competitive with the different level of education and wealth and all. And we now still face the problem of data, because with the 280 million population, we don't have the right data just to distribute all the social help and assistance. And so, yeah, I think those are the 3 most pressing issues at the moment.
Is your party seeing the same kind of issues that prioritize those issues?
Yeah, because my party chairman is also the coordinating minister for the economic affairs. So all the problems that I talk about just now is actually covered in his ministry. So because I am seated in the commission, which also covers finance and development planning, so it's kind of in line, and it makes my work a lot easier because I can connect what I do in the legislative branch with what he is doing in the executive branch with all the programs that he has.
How about Cambodia, Neth? What is the most pressing issue right now?
Right now is, the issues is the crisis from the COVID-19.
Okay.
Yes, because
Cambodia is the first country I went after COVID. It was interesting how happy people over there.
As in the world, Cambodia cannot escape from the crisis from the COVID-19, but with the policy of the vaccination made by the royal government of Cambodia, we can reopen the country last years, and every people, every citizen get at least 3 jabs of the COVID-19 vaccine. So that can make us strong and can reopen the country and the restart of economic. But as you know that Cambodia depend also on the tourism, and the hotel in Siem Reap, most of the hotel closed because no tourists. But now it's a restart. But the problem is during more than 2 years of the crisis, the people, face for the problem of the daily lives. So that's why the royal government of Cambodia support for the first time for we call social protection. We provide the money to the poor family, and we classify poor 1, poor 2. To support financial to them every month. So it's the government support this. So how to restore the economic is the best challenge for the Cambodian government. And after that, we think to the guarantee the stability is also because as the topic talking about the populists, about the fake news, about the the color revolution, etc. In terms of the competition, political competition, the opponent can also take opportunity for the crisis to gain voice in the country. So as the ruling party, we need also to guarantee this. The peace and the stability is the most important thing that we protect. So at the other hand, economic, infrastructure, education, technology, digitalization for the country. This is the most important topic that the royal government of Cambodia focus on that, and including also the environment, because Cambodia get a big growth on the development, but we need to also to think to the environment, how to treat the water treatment, and also the waste management, etc. That is the problem that we think, because we set up Cambodia in 2030 to become the high income, low middle country. 2050, the high income country. So we need also to be ready on the as our vision set up. So that's why we have a lot of things to do. Right. And on that, we also focus on the agriculture to modernize agriculture and also industry. Because Cambodia is one of country that support the supply to the order on the clothes, shoe, etc. So this is the vision of the Cambodia for move forward for the future. And
but for your personal opinion, though, what is the most pressing issue?
Yeah, my opinion, the issues is that the crisis that
The recovery from
yes,
COVID.
the recovery from the COVID-19 is the first step that we need to think, because if we don't save this phase, we cannot move forward to
Right.
the others because it's affect to the other aspect, you know.
How about Philippines?
In the Philippines, there are also a lot, but if I am to summarize them and explain briefly, the first would also be education. Well, I'm not too proud to say that actually we were the last country to decide to finally reopen our schools after a closure because of the pandemic. Also, it is connected to the type of pandemic response that was conducted by the national government of the Philippines. Even though there were calls early on from student governments, education advocates to pave the way for the reopening of our schools, it took almost 2 years before we finally opened our schools. And it caused a lot of learning losses on children and the Filipino youth. And right now, instead of prioritizing much needed education reforms to cope with the learning losses, we see that there is a disjunct between the actual needs of the education community and the priority proposals. For example, instead of allowing students to have opportunities to catch up in their lessons, the priority education reform would be the reinstatement or the revival of the mandatory military training program, which was already abolished. It was mandatory until 2001, but because of issues concerning the program, it was stopped. But this year, there is a proposal to revive that. And we are closely monitoring its progress as to how that kind of policy will move forward, if ever it will. Second would be also the economy. As students graduate from university, then their problem would be to find jobs, but still the economy is not that equipped to provide jobs that pay well and have decent working conditions. That is why we have a large portion of the population that goes out of the country to find jobs overseas. Around 10 million out of the 100 plus million Filipinos are actually overseas because of the difficulty to find decent work in the country. And third would be how people can be empowered enough to speak about these issues. Because the environment right now in the country is that if one wants to assert or speak their thoughts that might not be the one that is adopted by those in power, it comes with the risk of being labeled or branded as an enemy of the state. And it affects lots of people, non-government organizations, civil society organizations. For example, a fellow youth who initiated what we call a community pantry. So it is just a small setup where those with extra resources like food or money can put their resources, and those in need can line up to get what they need. So it's actually a good practice to help one another. But even such a simple and noble program was put in bad light by those in power, to the point that the initiator was called an enemy of the state. Now, even the former vice president of the country was labeled as such. So no one actually is protected, even if you're in a high position or if you're an ordinary citizen. If you speak out, there is such a risk. So those are interconnected, and we want to address all of them.
Okay, so this morning we had a section that talked about foreign policy of Thailand, and we have several academics and expert specialists on the panel, and they were talking about foreign policy of the country should not be just foreign policy. It should be like people-centric. It should be accessible to people. It should connect domestic and foreign policy together. So from all the issues that you guys mentioned, how do you think being a member of a regional summit or being part of this multilateral agreement and such can help with the issue in your country? Maybe Neth, you can go first.
Yes, can have, because we are in the same region and we need to work together. And as for example, the last summit in ASEAN and the related summit in Cambodia, this is the example, the evidence to show that the coordination among the country is very important to resolve the problem. For example, the Myanmar problem is also not only the people of the Myanmar themselves, but is the member of ASEAN need to have to resolve the problem. And also the economic and the social connection between the people and the people, we need also to work on this, because one country depends on the country. For example, the tourists, the economic, the exportation, etc. This is the work that we need to focus. And I think for each country have the duty to also inform their own people about the foreign policy. For example, Cambodia adopt the policy that we are neutral, and then we set up the policy that all countries are our friend. We need to extend our friendship with the other countries. So that's why this is the friendship policy that we need to build, and it's good for our diplomatic relation and also for economic, because the bilateral relation and also the multi relationship give us the benefit, because in terms of the diplomatic, we don't talk about the enemy, but we talk about the benefits, the interests. So that's why we need to focus on this. And I think like the UN Secretary General of the United Nations, Mr. Guterres visit Cambodia and join the ASEAN summit, and he's talked to our Prime Minister that ASEAN is a bridge, to connect between the other country to the other country, and then try to find a solution. If we are still separate, the world will be separate, and then who get the bad thing is the people. So that's why we need to cooperate and work together and strengthen the solidarity among the member of the ASEAN and also the world. And if we consider one country or to the other country as an enemy, you see Russia and Ukraine. Who is victim? The people. So we are in the political difference, but we need to keep the interest of the people for the most priority.
Parit?
Yeah, I think in Thailand, like foreign policy is often seen as being quite distant to the life of people in the country, and I think it's time to change that, right? And to see foreign policy as an important tool to use the international arena, international cooperation to deliver the benefits that solve Thai people's problems as well. I think there are three key areas that I can think about right now where I think international cooperation would be quite helpful for not just the Thai people, I'm sure people in other countries as well. The first one is the agenda on the environment and climate change. I mean, I think this is a classic case of a problem that cannot be solved by one country alone, but requires the cooperation of not just countries in the region, but across the whole world. And if I zoom in, not just on the overall problem of climate change, but I zoom in on the issue in Thailand of PM 2.5, I think the English phrase is haze, right? The haze, which is posing a big health risk to people in certain regions, especially in the Chiang Mai province in the north. We know in Thailand that the government, as a government, we can do better in terms of promoting public transport. We can do better in terms of increasing green areas. But no matter how good we do on those things, it's not going to solve the entire issue unless we also talk to other countries some of which may be the origin of where the haze is coming from. Right? So I think that's a clear case of how we can use the international cooperation, international arena to solve problems for the Thai people. That's number one. The second one, I think, is the crisis of aging society. I mean, we in Thailand know that we are facing an aging society where the share of working age population is decreasing. Right? And that poses a big fiscal constraint on our country's economy. Last year actually was the first year ever recorded in Thai statistics where the number of people that were born is less than the number of people who died.
I think we are the only one that's not developed country and having this problem.
Yes. Yeah, so we're in a uniquely...
We are very advanced.
Yeah, uniquely bad situation. And I think, of course, one solution that the country can do, that Thailand can do on its own is to promote, to give better security for new parents and newborn children, right? To make sure that people are more confident of having children. But I think at the end of the day, we cannot get away from also trying to increase working age population from foreign labor and foreign workers to work in Thailand more, right? So how do we attract people from other countries to choose to work in Thailand more and more? And then that requires international cooperation on mobility and ensuring that there are fewer restrictions in terms of moving and working between different countries, especially in ASEAN, right? And then I think the third one is tied to the point that I think many of us made earlier, which is how do we together as a region, stand up for common values on democracy and human rights? I mean, we see that issue of free speech is an issue that is currently being faced by not just Thailand, not just the Philippines, but many countries in ASEAN. So how do we together help stand for these values and hold other governments accountable?
But then with the different political system in each country members, it might be a bit difficult for ASEAN? I mean, that's why I think a dialogue needs to be made on what are the common democratic and human rights values that we need to together as a region protect, right? And of course, we need to understand that different countries will have different contexts, but I think having those shared values are important because if it gets to a stage where the local or the domestic checks and balances are not working, then having that additional international checks and balance system is actually could be beneficial to protecting the human rights of the people in each country. So I think for me, three agenda: climate change, mobility as a way of solving aging society, and sharing or standing up for common democratic and human rights values. Puteri.
Next year, Indonesia is going to be the host of ASEAN. So I really hope to see all of you there next year. And we just hosted the G20 as well. And we know there's a lot of MOUs that were signed during the whole G20 events. And I saw that they have made a lot of mutual understanding in a way that the MOUs that they signed is actually really beneficial for the problems that I just mentioned in our session. For example, our central bank, the Philippines, Malaysia, I forgot two other countries, Singapore, they signed an MOU which allows the QR, you can pay through the QR code, right. just the QR from your phone, and then you can scan. And this is actually one of the solutions for the Indonesian problem of financial inclusion. And it has been proven successful in our country. And if we were to open the access for, ASEAN tourists who come into Indonesia and use the QR just to make payment, it will make it a lot easier for the buyer and for the seller as well. And the money will go into their bank accounts right away, which will benefit them by, not having to explain their financial income to the banks when they are applying for loans. So that's just the step of one of the ways the foreign policy or foreign agreement can actually benefit people directly. And I really hope that when the ASEAN chairmanship and the ASEAN event will be held in Indonesia next year, we can have more discussion on how the transfer of knowledge from the more developed nations such as Singapore and Malaysia in ASEAN could benefit the other ASEAN members, because we all know that Singapore has one of the best education system, and they compete with the developed nations in Europe and America, but it does not translate to other country in ASEAN. And ASEAN has been, I don't know how long it has been established, but if this problem still persists in the neighboring countries, that there's, and that means there's really a problem with our organization. So I really hope the discussion next year would be more practical and would answer to a lot of the problems that I can sense that Philippines is facing the same problems, exactly the same problems that we're facing in Indonesia. So yeah, I think that's the most important thing that we can discuss next year.
Raoul.
In terms of relating with other countries, one way that it has concretely helped the Philippines is actually the Hague ruling. It was the ruling that declared the legitimacy of the claim of the Philippines on the South China Sea, the area that is being claimed by China, at the time when there was a stalemate between the two governments. And of course, China is asserting its claim. That issue was raised to the international community, and fortunately, the decision sided with the Philippines. And since the Hague ruling was issued, that has been invoked by the government, and also that is being discussed by ordinary citizens. And it is being quoted in many instances so that the people can really assert, and not just the government, but ordinary citizens can help in assertion over the right of the country to that territory. Second, international community can also be a way, as my fellow youth leader from Thailand has mentioned, how we can put a spotlight on issues that cannot easily be resolved within countries. Though, of course, that doesn't mean that we give up our sovereignty, but it's just a way for us to find common problems or find insights from our neighbors so that we can improve our local situation. For instance, just recently, the UN conducted its Universal Periodic Review on the situation of human rights in the Philippines because there have been camps that deny cases of violations or abuses, but because of the UN Universal Periodic Review, it gave the Philippines, more especially the non-government organizations and civil society organizations, to present concrete pieces of evidence on abuses and violations, despite denial by some officials. That is why, from that Universal Periodic Review, other countries were able to see and even give concrete recommendations as to how we can end the culture of impunity, how we can protect human rights defenders, journalists, and critics in doing their job of simply giving alternatives or speaking out, no? So that the functioning of the government can be better in service of the people. So those are some examples. And finally, it can also be a way, engagement within the international community can be a way to call for more diplomatic means to resolve issues or conflicts, no? We have seen that in the recent Ukraine-Russia war, how various countries have consistently been calling for peaceful resolutions and participation of people in crafting our way forward out of these conflicts.
So I think we have like 10, 15 minutes. If anyone want to ask question to our panelists, just raise your hand, okay? You're from Philippines, right? Yes, okay.
Hello, by the way. Good afternoon. My name is Kenneth. I'm a graduate student in Chulalongkorn University, and just like you said, I'm from the Philippines. So my question is that in the time of like social media, it also emerged the idea or concepts such as wokeism, political participation and such. However, we are still confronted with the problems of our traditions and our cultures. So, for example, in the Philippines, I will put a reference in the Philippines that in the recent election, while the media and other fact checkers already verified what happened in the history of martial law, the older generation have an advice to the younger generation that what happened is a beautiful part or a golden era, as they say. So these are like the problems that we are facing nowadays, like how the narrative of the older generation can change the path of the elections and definitely will affect our democracy. So for one, the voter turnout, the voters of the Philippines is like 56% are composed of the youth. So my question with this is I have two questions for everyone. So the first is, how will you persuade the youth in terms of your messaging as a politician, since you know that it is very important to persuade them? And the second thing is, how can you make a reform knowing that the need to confront culture, tradition, and even the older generation are still lingering in pushing for good government and progressiveness?
Who wants to go first? Maybe Raoul wants to go first.
Hello to my fellow Filipino. Yeah, I'll answer the question gladly first. On the first question, how older people might be offering or leading the country to a different path. Well, one concrete lesson that I learned during the past elections is that we might be divided when it comes to whom to support during elections, like who will older people vote for, who will young people vote for, who will people of a certain background or economic status vote for. But as long as we start the conversation by looking into the issues that really matter to them, we can start to lead those people into studying the facts and not be blinded by false narratives. To give a concrete example, well, I think it is public knowledge in the Philippines that when we ran in the elections, we did not support the incumbent president because, as mentioned, he is actually the son of the former dictator who led the martial law era that was mentioned. And it would be difficult for young people to give support to such a candidate. Now, there are people, or voters, who voted for our party, but also voted for the son of the dictator. So at first, it might look like cognitive dissonance, right? But in our end, we looked at that as a way to make other young people realize that actually older people, by sheer age, are not really a problem. It's just that they might have been also deceived by false narratives. But if they were able to vote for us, it means they see some hope in young people. So that is the challenge that we have to face. How we can make ourselves relatable, how to make our platforms more responsive, not just to the young, but to the older people. That way, even though we may debate at first whom to vote, but in terms of issues, in terms of platform, we agree. And we can make use of that approach even in future elections. Now, on the second question, I'm sorry, I forgot the second question. Can you repeat?
How can you be part of the reform, knowing that we are still confronting cultures, traditions, religion, and even the narratives of the older generation?
Okay. Culture cannot be changed overnight. Since culture is built over generations, it will also take generations to change culture. But step by step, we can do something. For instance, in the Philippines, we filed a bill that will teach critical media and information literacy among our young people. This is one way for us to educate the youth about how this information works, how it can be used to negatively influence decision-making and political actions by people. So we believe that it is one way to help the youth become better voters in the future generation. So what happened during the past elections has already happened, but it is one way for us to gather lessons so that we can move forward and be wiser when the next elections come.
Anyone want to add to Raoul?
Yeah, sure. I think two questions. Firstly, how do you persuade people, right? I think the key word is consistency. Consistency across 3 dimensions. Number one is consistency over time, right? So your principles do not change, your stand does not change, regardless of what the surrounding conditions are. I think that makes it much more convincing for the people receiving the message. Second one is consistency between different people. So if your party leader is saying one thing, but your party candidates or party staff is saying another, then that makes the message much less credible. It's much less convincing that this is what the party stands for. And then I think finally is the consistency between what you're saying and what you are delivering if you were given the opportunity. So I think for me that's the best way to convince people. And of course, you cannot convince people overnight, but it requires consistency over time, right? To your question about kind of how do we present reforms amidst certain resistance or maybe conservative traditions and values. I think for any politician, we need to accept the fact that any change will always face resistance, and you should never be shy of making an opinion that you feel is truly beneficial for the country, even if it's unpopular at the time. Right? I mean, if you're making a stance and you think that 100% of the people will agree with you, you will never get to do anything. No change will ever happen, right? And what is unpopular now, in 10, 20 years' time, may become more popular. And that is in your own hands about how well you can convince people over time that what you're presenting is actually something that is beneficial for the country. So I think, for any politician, we just need to don't be afraid to make unpopular opinions. And when we talk about change, I actually like the first question about who is easier to convince, people or people in general, or people in parliament or in these institutions, and everyone seems to have the same answer, right? I think that shows that when we talk about change, we're talking about 2 types of change. One is actual structural legal change, so expecting parliament to vote through a certain law or a certain policy. And the other one is societal change, so the support that society gives to your ideas. And most of the time, society will change before the legal and the structural change happen. So I think to give you perspective, we submitted overall 25 drafts to amend this constitution. Guess how many passed in Thailand? 1. Because for any constitutional amendment to pass, you require a third of the military appointed senators. So of course, anything that goes against their interests, they're going to vote it down. But across those 25 drafts are opportunities for us to communicate to the public about what is wrong with this constitution. I think even though at the end of the day, 24 of those, legislative changes did not happen, I'm sure that, throughout the process, societal change happened. And then over time, the institutions cannot resist what society is calling out for.
Okay. Anyone else want to add?
Yeah, I just add about the consistency, the message, especially during electoral campaigns is very important. So make difference. For example, our experience with the old generation and the young generation, we have the different message. We have the same political policy for the framework for the party, but for the campaigners, we need to make a difference because the target audience is the most important. You cannot say the same message to the old generation and the young generation. For example, the old generation, we're talking about the stability, the peace, because they cross the civil war, everything, something like that. For the young generation, you cannot recall. Yes, you can recall, but not a most part of your message, but focus on their daily life or their future. This is the best design of the message. And for us, we have also use the social media because Facebook and TikTok is very popular in Cambodia. Now become the primary sources for the information for the people. So we need also to focus this for the young generation, but the older generation, we keep the traditional ways, door-to-door campaigns. It means we go one house by one house and explain to the old generation and send the message. So first, keep your message, what you want to say, but you also need to know your target audience, what you want to tell them. Because if you don't know the target audience, you cannot send the right message to them. Thank you very much.
Okay, I'll conclude because there's only 43 seconds left. But I'll conclude by saying it's thanks to social media, we can be held accountable for our work as politicians. Because the House of Representatives of Indonesia is one of the most hated institution. My fellow Indonesian can agree with me there. One of the most hated institution in Indonesia with the lowest trust rate from the public.
Okay.
We had a survey earlier this year among all the institutions. We are we're the lowest actually, with only 55% trust from the younger generations, 40 and under. So by reporting what we do and on social media across all the different networks, and I have this pledge to myself from the time I was elected that I will always make this periodic report on my social media on every recess. So when the session ends and the recess begins, I will report what I said on hearings. I will report what budgets that were discussed and then agreed upon in my House Commission. And then I will report how many times I was not present in the office, because there was a big debate about the absence of the MPs in Indonesia. And I will also report how many, social assistance that I have delivered to my constituents. And it has been given positive feedbacks from the public. They said that, this is the kind of standard that all MPs in Indonesia should deliver. Like you guys should report all of your work to your constituents, so we all know that you're actually working in your office, not just sleep. because a few people was captured as being,
Oh, not just in Indonesia.
falling asleep in hearings. So I think we can make politics more transparent and more accountable, and it is a sign that our generations can actually make the reform that we have been waiting for.
Consistency in communication and have data to back it up. Right. I think that conclude. Okay, one more question, quick one.
Hi, my name is Chaika. I am from Foreign Committee with the Parliament. My question is simple. It's just to promote diversity in politics, including genders and ages. In your view, how can our political parties in ASEAN country stay connected or have a tangible form of collaboration to promote the different genders, including different diversity, including ages and genders, women and LGBTQ?
So how each government,
How each of our political parties in ASEAN stay connected to promote the diversity.
is that the way that we can use the international stage to help promote diversity in politics?
I think this is it depends on each country. They set the policy, you know. For example, Cambodia, we set up for our ruling party. For our parties, set up 1/3 of the young the youth to be integrated in all level of the administration, including parliament, government, and also the sub-level, sub-national level, you know. So this is the way that to ensure that the youth can have the possibility to integrate as they start their job, and they also start to get the experience from the old generation. This is the combination or the harmonization of between the old generation and the young generation. For the women also, our party, our government allow. Even we know that Cambodian for the women, they don't get high education, but we encourage them because if, for example, the Ministry of Women in charge of the women affair, we cannot appoint it as man as the minister. Should be a woman, you know, because they know each other. And each ministry should have the leader as the woman because they in charge the gender, the children, etc. So this is the way that we want to share the responsibility to the women. They know their own problem. So this is the integration. I think for the evidence from Cambodia can also, we see that when we have the voice, the different voice from the man, from the woman, they can sing also to the different thing that only men sing. But when we have the voice from the woman, we can make a more efficiency of the policy, etc. Yeah.
Parit, maybe do you have something you can share from the Move Forward Party? I would say it's one of the most obvious party with gender diversity in Thai politics.
Yeah, so I think, I don't think there's like one clear set of correct answers in terms of what measures should be taken. If we were to talk about kind of setting quotas and positive discrimination, I think we could be debating for days on the pros and cons of that. But I think at the end of the day, is how do we integrate all groups, all genders, all age groups, or all professions to be treated as equals in any organization. I think as political parties, it's important in terms of setting the tone and being a role model for other organizations as well. I think one thing that we see and we try to do is to make sure that we don't. So when we talk about like promoting, let's say, women in politics, right? What we don't want to see is just panel discussion on women's rights and then each party sending female politicians to those panels. But what we want to see is that female politicians don't just represent the party at women's rights panels, but they represent the party at economics panel, education panel. I think that's what it means to to be truly treated as equals, right? Similarly, young politicians should not only represent the party at panels on youth and education policies, but also on other policy areas as well. So I think that's what we try to do as much as we can in terms of making sure that we give equal opportunities to all groups across all issues.
Anyone else want to add?
I'm sorry. Just what I meant in my question is that how can we form a tangible collaboration between countries, in between political parties?
How do you use international stage? How do you use international stage to connect each party when it's come to gender and age diversity?
Yeah, I think one thing that we can explore is how to have fora wherein concerned parties or groups can share the situation in their own countries regarding the issues that were raised, and whatever are the local laws or ordinances that are already in place to protect people regardless of age or gender, and we can help explore how practices in various countries can be better expressions of our commitments to international conventions that seek to protect the rights of these groups. And that way, we can share our experiences and then move forward collectively.
I just add that according to the ASEAN Charter, we cannot interfere in the internal affair of the each country. Yes, this one.
Yes.
But through the mechanism, the inter-parliamentary, you have also the ASEAN Summit that they can discuss. At least each country can share the best example. Through also the civil society, the ICHA, for example, on the human rights, they can discuss. I think they can have voice on this even the ASEAN Charter that we cannot interfere in the internal affair, but sometimes for the common interest we need to raise. For example, at the ASEAN Summit, our Prime Minister initiated the ASEAN Green Deal. It means that this is for the interest for the region, So I think the leader of the ASEAN event with the young leaders, we can move forward on this and then raise the issues. So step by step, I think people will heard and the leader will heard on this and then find the solution. If we want this but we don't raise, I think we cannot find the ways. So I encourage, I think because we don't want one country to the other country, we have the very, very far different, for the practice. This is the way that we want to get the member engaged, because we will be under one umbrella, the ASEAN Charter, but we need also to find what is the common point that we can work together, to do not make a difference for the human being, for example, the respect of the women rights, the youth, etc. So I think the member of the ASEAN need also to work together and to consider more than that not only the political, economic, and we're talking about the social connection. So the social connection should include what you raised in the question. Thank you.
Well, I think the quickest collaboration we can have is through our youth caucuses, because I know in different ASEAN countries, youth caucus is common now. So social diversity issue and gender issue and economic issue can be discussed, and we can learn from each other through our interaction. Because thanks to forum like this, we finally know each other. I haven't met all of these guys before, but I think we should make more events specialized on networking all these young leaders who are supposed to be like the future leaders, just to see the difference that we can make in our respective country.
Yeah, I think just very quickly, another platform I think is there are these kind of regional organizations that are aligned to different ideologies, right? So right now, Move Forward is part of the SOCDEM group, which is all the political parties in the Asian region that are aligned to, I guess, center-left social democratic ideologies. And I'm sure there are similar ones across other ideologies as well. So I think using these platforms to discuss and exchange ideas on promoting gender equality is one potential tangible method.
Okay, I would like to thank all the questions, and I would like to thank the panelists that have been sharing your thought, your idea, and your experience on stage. I think it has been interesting, and it also showed that even though we're from different countries, there's a lot of things in common.